Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Financial crime is evolving and business must evolve with it. The challenges facing business leaders cut across every sector, every industry and every region. Global cybercrime cost is expected to grow by 15% per year over the next 5 years, reaching $10.5 trillion annually by 2025, up from $3 trillion 10 years earlier. But it's not all cybercrime. While the world has changed and the threats are evolving, there are some elements that stay the same, like fraud. I'm joined today by McGrathNicol partner Matt Fehon and director Sara Deady. McGrathNicol is a supporter of this podcast, of course. Matt, Sarah, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Hi, Sean.
Thanks for having us.
First, the basics. Matt, I'm going to start there. What are the different types of financial crime?
Thanks, Sean. I think, from my perspective, having investigated financial crimes for a long time now, 10 years in the police force and over 20 years now as a forensic accountant, I think the one observation I'd like to emphasise is the definition of financial crime remains the same and is fairly constant, but the types of schemes continue to evolve as you'd outlined in your introduction. I think, 30 years ago was bank robberies and old traditional crimes. Today it's crypto-related crimes, cryptocurrency-related crimes. And I think, the types that we see, they are related to the theft of funds, assets, either directly or indirectly. But when we look at a business, generally, we're looking at internal fraud or external fraud. And often it's either by an employee or an employee colluding with someone externally. We still see large amounts of financial crime within the financial services sector where we've got traditional bank-related fraud. But the types that we often come across and what's evolved, embezzlement, as you've touched on, cyber attacks are just increasing, and the theft of IP or intellectual property. Ransomware is, well reported these days, but significantly impacts companies. International bribery and corruption. I think with COVID, we've seen an inability of organisations to oversee their operations internationally, but a lot of bribery and corruption scandals domestically over the last few years. The financial markets and insider trading is another type that we see regularly in our business. But I think financial misstatement is something that we did a lot of work on post the global financial crisis. And I think, the eye of the storm, which I think we're in at the moment with the economic winds shifting, financial accounts and misstatement will become something that we'll probably see a little bit more of over the next few years. But the one thing that, as I said earlier, cryptocurrency and digital asset crime is really increasing. And I think, the final one I'll just touch on is with the casino inquiries that we've seen around Australia over the last 2 years, foreign interference and influence and the money laundering schemes behind that with the flow of funds from international organised crime groups is one that has been significantly highlighted, but is a new financial crime, I suppose, with the influence across political parties and others that has certainly become more prevalent over the last 2 years.
It certainly sounds a lot more complex than trying to find a bank robber. And it's a bit of a trite comment, but it's kind of true.
It is. I won't say that it was always that easy to find a bank robber, but today, I must say, everything really does relate and revolve around, the digital footprint or the digital fingerprint these days, whether that be in email, whether that be in, financial records that are held electronically, whether that be on social media.
Yeah.
And through the COVID period, with people working from home, a lot harder for organisations and managers, executives to have that oversight or, for internal controls to be really monitored. So it has been a lot harder and is getting harder, I think, with, often the faceless perpetrator who is sitting behind a computer anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Sarah, Matt just mentioned COVID and what's happened during the COVID period. What are the trends that you're seeing with financial crime as we come out of COVID?
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, it's clearly it's been a really tough time. The way that we work, the way that we do things has completely changed over the last couple of years. And with that, financial crime has evolved. It's had to evolve, and it's taken advantage, I think, of those systems and changes that have occurred within workplaces. I think if we separate and we look at things from an external fraud threat and an internal fraud threat perspective, as Matt spoke to, those external fraud threats have become increasingly sophisticated over the last couple of years. Cybercrime, without question, as you've both spoken to, remains the most significant threat to business. It's at the front of mind of boards across the country. And we've seen an exponential increase in organised crime within that cybercrime area. And I don't think there's any question that that's in part been driven by the fact that, you know, these criminals are targeting vulnerable employees that are working from home. They're sitting at their desks without the ability to sort of question and ask other people that they sit next to whether they should or shouldn't do something that they've been requested to do. I think the other thing that we're seeing within that external fraud threat sphere, and that we're going to continue to see, are these state-based attacks and organised crime attacks targeting businesses. These groups are, you know, it's not your single hacker sending a poorly worded email requesting money. These are groups that are incredibly well resourced and skilled. They operate for a profit. And they've got significant funding behind them. And we're seeing these actors, they target organisations for a multitude of different reasons, be that financial gain in the case of ransomware, or just to cause mass disruption. Like, we've had so much disruption over the last couple of years. They want to disrupt supply chains. They want to disrupt networks for no other reason but to do so. So I think we're seeing a lot of that, and I think we're going to continue to see that emerge as this new normal sort of comes in the world. And then I think also there's this threat of, it's the stealing of data. Data is, as Matt's touched on, data is absolutely crucial. Private information, people stealing that information for either to sell on or, again, just to wreak havoc across markets. Secondly, I think we talk about internal fraud threats a lot, and that's where I've spent most of my career, is investigating internal workplace fraud. And as we said, workplaces have changed. I think early on in the pandemic, we probably saw with people working from home, there was this aspect of more fraud was being reported because suddenly you weren't sitting next to the person that you had long held suspicions about. So there was that element of separation there. Whereas now I think we're emerging from 2 years of perhaps teams not operating next to each other at all. And there's come to this point where we've got extreme levels of isolation have occurred, hardship, anxiety, mental illness, and this can drive people to make some pretty poor decisions. And when you've got teams that are operating in a really decentralized environment, people can't see that, your colleagues can't see that. And I think probably what we're going to see play out over the next 12 months is, as people return to this new normal back in the office, a certain level of oversight and control from a people perspective is going to return. And I think we might see these red flags and issues start to emerge as sort of those pressures that are being faced by staff become a reality.
Stay with me, Matt and Sarah. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is McGrathNicol partner Matt Fehon and director Sara Deady. Matt, can you give us some sort of example, make it more practical for us, some sort of example of the typical financial crime that McGrathNicol might come across?
The first thing I'd say, no two matters are the same, and I think that's probably what is the most interesting aspect of the work we do. And I think, you know, for forensic accountants or forensic technology specialists, it is the variety of work. You know, as financial crime evolves, it's getting insights as to what is new. What are these criminal entrepreneurs designing and undertaking? So I might talk to a matter both Sarah and I are involved in, but this involved some government funding that was being let out to support businesses in times of economic downturn. And that funding became known to one of our clients' contractors, who approached our client and one of their senior executives and offered them $500,000 if they provided them the preferential treatment to give them the work. What we had to do was work through that matter and understand whether allegations that had been put forward were in fact correct. So we did an initial piece of work across a range of emails that we were able to capture from our client.
And so this is very much making sure what you just said actually happened.
Yeah, that's right. So we get often the matter, or our client, the business, may have received some information, raised some allegations, or a staff member's come forward or a whistleblower's come forward to make some allegations or put some information forward to say, they think something's not right here, or this is specifically what's happened. So, that first step is really, okay, let's look at what's available to the organisation that they can provide us, just to see if there's any substance to those allegations before kicking off a full-blown investigation. In this instance, yes, we could see some email correspondence that didn't look like it was normal business. And then we went a few steps further where we were able to then get some bank account information from our client, which confirmed a number of transactions that were in the allegations. So they then sought to secure other electronic information that they had available to them and that the actual employee, the executive, had stored on servers in remote locations, and it confirmed that there was website hosting, other services going on, and within the data that was held externally, this employee was actually running a set of financial accounts for his own little business, which included recording this $500,000. So there's a digital aspect, but there's actually a craft in at what time do we go more overt and more open with the investigation. But the initial inquiries is what we look to confirm.
Even that, it means you need to get access to information. I mean, it's quite forensic, and you need to get access to information that might be pretty difficult. I mean, presumably the employee is not just going to give you that information.
No, and obviously they've got rights, which we all uphold, and we work with lawyers and we work with the client, obviously, to ensure that there's nothing untoward in the approach. We need to maintain the integrity of every investigation in our approach, should that ever be questioned. By a regulator, or more importantly, our work is tested in court, and that's the standard we work towards all the time. I think the one thing is what we do find with fraudsters often, once they realise the game is up, you do start to see a lot of compliance and offering of that information. But to your point, we work with lawyers. It could be civil matter that we're working on, and if that's the way it's going, there's civil procedures and subpoenas and whatnot that can be sought to get that information. Or secondly, if it's really serious, often the matter is reported to the police, and we may, the company and also ourselves, may receive the benefit of information that the police are then able to get hold of.
Okay, Sarah, you a moment ago you talked about returning back to the workplace might slow some internal financial crime. In the example Matt just gave there, I wonder whether if people are sitting next to each other, that's less or more likely to happen. What do you think will happen, though, with financial crime over coming months and years? Do you think that return to the workplace might mean that there's less internal financial crime, but more external financial crime? What's the trend?
I think we're probably still going to see both aspects play out. I think the rise in external financial crime, which, covers the front pages of the papers most days, I think we're going to still continue to see that rise. I think the world that we're emerging in is probably not what we'd all hoped for. We're in a position now, we've got the war in Ukraine, interest rates are rising, this huge disruption to global supply chains that has obviously been brought about by COVID. And we're seeing, spend within business really tightening. So this creates a huge amount of pressure on the economy. I think we were able to ride the wave over the last couple of years, obviously due to the huge amount of funding and stimulus and benefits that were provided. But I think we're entering this kind of area similar to what we saw out of the GFC. And what we saw out of that was a real increase in, I guess, those internal frauds, both on a large and small scale. I think the pressure that's coming within business at the moment puts pressure on that bottom line, and it puts pressure on the people and the executives within businesses. There's that pressure there within business. And I think you've got, what is black and what is white becomes grey in times like these, I think, and people make decisions and make the wrong moves, and they stray into territory that, can very quickly grey into this area of financial crime as they're trying to, present a particular position to the market that things are looking okay. So I think we're going to see probably an increase in that financial statement disclosure type, fraud type issues. But then as far as the other threats that I think we're going to see, they're external. There's a great deal of external threats that I think are going to continue to play out. Cyber's here to stay. Businesses have really got that challenge of both building their resilience but responding swiftly when this occurs, because it's not a matter of if, it's really when. We're also going to see, I think, with as I said, the huge government stimulus that's been handed out across various sectors and industries over the last couple of years, there is no question that organised crime and fraudsters have infiltrated those processes. This funding was handed out very quickly. And yes, there were checks and balances in place, but we all know that criminals will take advantage of systems where they can. So I think we're going to see that play out. I think there's going to be reports of that, and there's going to be a real need to identify where those funds have been misused and where they've ended up, because it's taxpayers' money. And then crypto, I don't think any discussion around financial crime in 2022 doesn't involve crypto. We're seeing crypto scams hit the market every second day. Crypto is definitely the favoured method for payment of ransom demands because of the ease with which value can be transferred relatively anonymously. And I think we may also see crypto become a method for the payment of bribes and kickbacks. I mean, it's the brown paper bag, isn't it, that we've seen historically. Yeah. It's a great way of transferring funds. And I think we're still operating in a very unregulated market when it comes to cryptocurrencies, and this is where criminals really thrive. So I think there's going to be a big demand for services there around freezing and securing those assets that have been misappropriated.
Talking through that, I mean, there's a real spectrum, and indeed there are shades of grey in fraud itself. It still surprises me, not so much sort of state activity and just straight out criminal activity. That's kind of one basket. It still surprises me, though, that people commit fraud because they push the boundaries just a little too far. They may not think themselves that it's criminal activity, but it actually does turn into fraud. Given that the checks and balances now, it surprises me at that end, people still do it.
Oh, totally, Sean. Having done this now for 15 years, showing my age, I'm still shocked by the schemes and the things that we do see. It's a very slippery slope, and what goes on in the mind of a fraudster as they commit that first crime can very quickly become justified, whether that be, an invoice fraud through to, huge financial misstatement. People make decisions and then they justify those decisions. They rationalise them in their mind that they're okay.
Yeah. And they're not. At the end of the day, they're not.
Exactly.
So, Matt, every business leader out there that's listening to this must be worried about this. What do they need to be doing to meet these challenges?
It's just back to basics and the basic controls and governance structures that organisations need to have in place. I think it's, with new technology, obviously that presents a challenge for the workplace and the business, but it also presents an opportunity for anyone that wants to exploit it. And the number of times I must say that we've been involved where it's been someone involved in a technology implementation program or change program where someone has taken advantage of that change to exploit the financial accounts, that highlights just the controls that need to be in place around any change in the workplace. But I think understanding, as I say, basics, risk managers are really important. The controls around any financial transactions and dealings, having independent oversight around contractual arrangements, large contracts that are being sought or won, declarations of independence, and doing that annually. And then it's down probably just a simple training of what are the values of the organisation, but what are the standards and what are the expectations of employees. And the communication and strong tone from the top are really the basics. But when it comes down to the matters that we get involved in and the investigations, often it's looking back and seeing that, the exception reports or the alerts and the red flags, as Sarah's referred to, just have not been looked at. And there's been the oversight. And unfortunately, what I will say is, the victim organisation and the people who have worked in that group or that business with the fraudster often themselves feel an element of guilt because, there's been a breach of trust, but often when they look back, the red flags were there, it was obvious. What we do see a lot, someone's got this hidden lie, and Sarah might talk to that actually, but the number of extramarital affairs, if I say, that's been prevalent when there's been a fraud where someone's compromised their own position.
Wow. Yeah.
The way I put it, if someone is lying at home about something, how easy is it for that person to lie in the workplace? That's certainly what I'd be looking at as the typical red flags outline, as Sarah's referred to, but changes in an individual's lifestyle.
You'd agree with that, Sarah, as a red flag, just changes in people's lifestyles?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's how it plays out, as Matt said. If you're willing to lie at home and you're willing to lie to your friends and family, it's not a great leap to be lying to your colleagues. That's definitely the case. And I think also what's come about is we talk about red flags a lot when we do our fraud awareness training, and it's people living beyond their means.
Yep.
It's people working late, not going on holidays or taking extravagant holidays. It's driving a fancy car into the office. We've lost visibility of every single one of those over the last couple of years. So as Matt said, it's that back to basics and understanding your employees and making sure that your controls are in place and that you know where they sit within a process and within a function. Because, you've got to trust your employees. Ultimately, that's what you have to do, but you've got to make sure you've got the systems in place to control things.
Matt, Sarah, thank you both for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
That was the McGrathNicol partner, Matt Fehon, and director, Sara Deady. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.